Hello everyone, today we're going to be making some scatter terrain for fantasy games. This could be for just about anything. Dungeons and Dragons, Mordheim, Warhammer, Rangers of Shadow Deep, any of those things it could be from. What it's actually for is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. So I've got this board game and it's got the flat printed pieces of terrain on it. We're going to dress it up a little bit with 3D stuff. It's a long involved process that really slows down the gameplay. I don't recommend it, but that's what we're doing. So this is scenario 8. We're up to scenario 8, so as you can see I've already made some terrain for the previous scenarios, but it's not quite enough. I still have a couple of things I need to make for this next one. You can see there's a bunch of these shelf, table things, workbench kind of stuff in this. It's supposed to be like a warehouse. So I made a bunch of these benches for the previous one. There's a total of 8. You know, it sure is easy for these people to just copy and paste this stuff, but we have to make it, so there you go. So I need 2 more, so we're going to be making those. We need 3 crates total. I already have 2, so I got to make 1 more, and we got 2 barrels. So is that clear? We're going to be making some of these benches with various things on them. We're going to be making some crates and some barrels. Bear in mind that most of the techniques that I've used in these builds were not developed by me. Some were, but a lot of them I picked up from other YouTube channels like Wylock's Armory, Black Magic Craft, and Carl Makes Stuff. So take a look around, there's a lot of good stuff out there. The first project we're going to start with are the crates. Those are nice and quick and easy. It's good to start off with. And we're going to start with these wooden cubes. You can find these in arts and crafts stores. You can find them in places like the Dollar Tree, art supply stores, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the ones I used here were 1 inch wide. You can find ones that are smaller than these. They're 1/2 inch. I'm going to try these 3/4 inch. They seem like a nice medium size. These ended up being a little bit big on the Gloomhaven hexes. And I'm going to go ahead and make 2 of them because might as well. So I got those, and now I'm going to take out some long matchsticks. These are going to be cheaper for you than buying wooden dowels, wooden square dowels in the long run. I bought a container of these years and years ago, and I'm only now running out of them. So I'm going to cut out a bunch of sections that are as wide as the blocks. We're going to need 6 per crate, so 12 total. So just line it up like there, saw through with X-Acto. There we go, there's 1. They don't have to be perfect, this is medieval stuff. So yeah, do that until you stop. With that done, we're going to take our cube and we're going to go and we're going to find a side of it with nice lateral striations, nice grain going across. We don't want the one that's cut straight across that looks all like that. I mean, it's no big deal if you choose one of those sides, but I think it's going to look better if we choose one with a nice grain going like that. And so then we're going to take a little bit of regular white glue, put a little bit down like that, and we're going to take 2 of our sticks. They can be the uglier ones that we've created. We're just going to put them on the sides there. I'm going to try and get them flush with the edges. You don't really need to do this step, but the deal is I'm just kind of increasing the height of these a little bit. You'll notice I started off with cubes, but when I dressed them up with these side pieces, they widened out. They became less cube-like. So I'm going to add a little bit to the bottom on these, and I'm going to make them more like a cube. So let those dry for a little bit, and we'll go on to the next step. Once those are reasonably dry, we're going to take another 4 of these sticks, and we're going to continue the process. So again, a little white glue. Like that. And we're going to place them in 4 spots. So we're going to cover up that stick that we just put there. We're going to put another one on that same side at the top. bit like that. Flip it over and do the exact same thing. One covering up the stick that we just put on, and one on the opposite end. Now for each crate we're going to cut 4 more matchsticks, so 8 total. And this time the length is going to be from the end of outside of one of those matchsticks we attached to the other side. So, you know, the entire new width of the crate. I think you can probably tell where I'm going with this. I'm going to cut out 4 of those, and I'm going to attach them right along those spaces. So right there, right there, right there, and right there. Try and cover up that gap at the bottom as best we can. Make sense? Once we've got our nice double row of matchsticks along the top and the bottom of our crate, we are going to go and make 4 more matchsticks cut to the length of the sides. So let's take this. Let's get myself a measurement just real quick. I'll cut this down to about right there. Cut that off. See how we did. Oh, not enough. There we go. So, I'm gonna take some glue. Put a drop there. There. Wedge that in all nice. And do that 3 more times. Okay, we're almost done. They're starting to look very crate-like. So the final step is to take our matchsticks again, cut an angle off one end that's a bit more than 45 degrees. So a little something like that. Then we're going to fit it into this inset box on each side. Let's mark out about where we need to make our next cut, the next angled slice to get it to fit in there. About right that. Cut that down. Let's see how we did. Yeah, pretty good. Now we just glue that in. Do that for the other 3 sides, and we have some crates. For our next terrain pieces, we need some barrels, and so here's how you go and get barrels. What you want to do is play miniature war games for like 30 years, and eventually you're just going to collect a bunch of these. Listen, if there was a really cost-efficient, easy way to make barrels, I'd tell you how to do it. I've looked into it. It's not worth your time. You should, if you haven't, acquired some plastic barrels from the Ogre Lead Belchers, the Empire Cannon, the D&D Tavern Terrain set, any of that stuff, then maybe you gotta go on Etsy and just buy yourself a pack. You can buy some wooden ones from the craft store, but honestly, I don't like them. I don't think they really have enough detail for them. These are little resin ones. I don't even know where these came from. I inherited them from another hobbyist collection. Anyway, just barrels. You'll end up with them. Sorry, I don't have something more directly helpful to tell you. So now it's time for the more complicated pieces, these bench, table, shelf units here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 regular craft popsicle sticks, get those at any arts and crafts stores. We're going to take our white glue, just going to run a bead down one edge like that. I'm going to stick them together. You may need to try a couple of these popsicle sticks to find 2 that fit flush together. They do have a tendency to warp. They are not all nice and flat. And now we're going to take some coffee stirrer sticks. So just like we did before, we're going to take a run of glue, run it along the side. Again, I have chosen these out ahead of time to find ones that actually match the sides or straight enough that they will fit together like that. So there we go. Got 2 double wide planks. Set those somewhere that I'm not worried about them adhering to the surface as they dry. And we'll be back. Next, we're going to go back to our handy long matchsticks and cut out some table legs. I made mine about 3/4 of an inch long. So just mark that about there. Obviously, we'll need 4 for each table, so 8 total, because we're making 2 of them. Next, we're going to go and grab ourselves another popsicle stick. I'm going to cut off the end like this, and we're going to cut out 4 lengths about 1/2 inch long. I'm going to use the X-Acto for the second cut because using the scissors, although it is quicker, it does have a tendency to split, which is not what we want. So cut like so, which is a bit of a pain. There you go. 4 of those. Now we take one of these 1/2 inch popsicle stick offcuts and we run some glue down the sides, the long sides. A bit like that. And we're going to attach these legs to either side. I'm going to make one side flush and the other side sticking out, so a little fiddly, but it's going to go a bit like that. So do 4 of these. Now we're going to take our 2 popsicle sticks that we glued together and take our metal straight edge. We're going to lop off the curved ends, give it a nice flat edge. This is possibly going to take a while because these are a little thick. Goes. There we go. There. And then we're going to cut out 2 sections about 2 inches long. Two inches. 2 inches. Cut that the same way. And we're gonna do the same thing to our glued together coffee stirrers, only this time we're gonna cut them out in the lengths about 1 5/8 inches. Now comes another kind of fiddly part. We've got our materials here. For each table we're gonna have one section of the double popsicle sticks, one section of the double coffee stirrers, and then our matchsticks plus popsicle sticks. I have 2 of those table ends. So, got our white glue again. A faster drying thing, I don't know, it might be helpful in some ways, like hot glue or something like that. But really, you want to be able to move this stuff around once you place it. And it's real warm right now, so the white glue is going to get tacky pretty fast. So I'm going to take these. Now, notice for your legs, you've got one kind of flat flush side and one where the legs stick out a little bit. So I'm going to take the sticky outy side and I'm going to place that on the outside of the table. And of course, the end with the legs projecting down goes towards the bottom. And I'm going to put them pretty close to the ends. And then, here's the tricky part. We're going to take our double coffee stirrers. And we're going to try and fit them in between the table legs. A bit like that. On the actual stuff that goes on the tables, the little details that might be kind of annoying or the fun part of the project depending on your perspective. So the first thing we're going to do is just make some cups. These tables go in a warehouse, but I'll also go over the alchemist lab things that I made for the last project. So the cups I just made, I bought like a ton of these perler cap things. They're little plastic cylinders that go on a grid and then you put them in a certain pattern and iron them down. You can find them in craft and hobby stores. Anyway, I mean, they're just little cylinders. They're just little cups. You can just glue those on directly. You want some tipped over, you glue them on the side. You want to take a little model feather from your bits box and stick it inside. Now it's an inkwell. And if you want to make them, hold on, let me fix that. You want to put a dab of glue in there, just glue it down like that. And if you want to make them a jar, you just take a section of round sprue, slightly smaller than the width of the perler caps. You cut out a thin sliver. This is old sprue, so it's made with really dense plastic, so it's a little harder to cut. Yeah, just take a little bit like that, add a little dab of crazy glue, that, stick it on the top of the perler cap, like so. And when you go to paint it, paint the cap brown or some lid cork-like color, and the rest of it your earthenware or glass, and there you go, jar. Might as well make some bottles to go with those cups and jars that we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little candle like that. My favorite method is to take a little section of round plastic sprue and a candle, and we're just going to melt the center section a bit, and as we do it we're going to slowly pull it apart. So it feels softening like that. Yep, there we go. Just gonna pull it apart a bit like that. I'm gonna let that harden. Gonna make sure it's, gonna make sure it's as even as possible. You know, I don't want the center section to sag. And then once it's cooled, like that, we go and cut it in the center, and then again towards the base of the bottle. And ta-da! We got 2 wine bottles. As a final detail, you could go back in, just heat up the tip and smush it down on a surface to get yourself a little lip of the bottle. And you can even put a little cork. You know, you can make that out of a little section of toothpick and glue it on the top if you wanted to do that. Let's keep going with this and make another kind of bottle. For this example, we've got an old necklace here, a collection of beads here, some that I bought from a craft store. So we're going to take this round one. We're going to let's pour out a couple of these. There's a pretty good one for the top. And sometimes you can use just a longer stretch of a small bead. Sometimes you can use a bit of round sprue. In this case, the size works out that I'm going to use one of my favorite materials. I'm going to use the inside of a pen. There's a little plastic tube in here that works pretty well for a lot of projects. The nice thing about using this is that it doesn't even ruin the pen. You can still use it. So just cut a little section off like that. Make sure the cuts are relatively flat so we get a nice even connection with the beads. Let's see. I think that's pretty good. A little bit of crazy glue. Attach that onto the bead like so. And a little bit on top for the lip of the bottle. So after a bit of fiddling around, we end up with something like that. If we wanted to add a cork to it, what we could do is take a little toothpick, cut a section off near the taper, like that. There we go. And just pop it in there. There you go, little cork. And of course these beads can be used for smaller jars. For example, here's a little one that's a little taller. We can take the same kind of thing. Take a section of toothpick. Clip off a little there. Cut a little down there. There we go. Just glue that in like that, make a little corked bottle. We can take some of these taller beads. We can get ourselves a little bit of round sprue. Say, like this piece here. Try and get a nice thin, even slice. Not as even as I'd like. That's a little bit better. One drop of glue on that. There that is. Another jar for the collection. And that'll do it. A selection of jars and bottles for your tables. Now I figured we'd move on to some books. So the first step is to just take a little offcut of some flat piece with a little bit of thickness to it. You could use foam board or a couple of pieces of cardboard glued together. In this case, I'm going to use one of these offcuts of my Popsicle Sticks just because I have it lying around. And I'm going to take a little scrap of this manila folder material, which I find is a pretty good thickness. And I'm going to cut out a strip just a little bit wider than my popsicle stick. So just about like that. And cut it like that. Check my work. Yeah, reasonable. Take my glue. Let's see, which is the good side? There, that's a nice flat edge. I'll use that for the outer edge of the book. And glue on either side. Spread it around. Take my manila folder paper, fold it all the way around like that. Yeah, there we go. Trim it to fit. And then I'm going to smash down that side to get a better looking end to the book. There. Little book if you want it. If we're going to do books, might as well do scrolls. I find masking tape works pretty well for the thickness that I want. Tear off a piece. Make it double thickness. Cut it to an appropriate size. Let's say something like that. There you go. Then roll it up. There we go. There, that's pretty good. Let's put a dot of glue in here to keep it in place. There we go. And while that's drying, let's cut out another little strip. Nice thin one this time. Bit more glue. take this. And we'll use it to wrap up the scroll. Let me just tighten this a little bit. There we go. Just wrap that around. Would you believe I do this a lot better if I don't have a camera in my way? There we go. That's maybe a little bit too much. I don't need quite that much for the central strip. There. Something like that. Next, might as well make some candles so we can read by. And so I've cut out some lengths of that round plastic sprue, and I got my hot glue gun all heated up. So what I'm going to do, these things are pretty easy, is I'm going to take the hot glue gun, I'm just going to melt down the top of it a little bit, not using any glue ideally, just melting the plastic itself, get a nice surface. And then I'm just going to add a little drop of hot glue to the very top. And if I can, I'll tease it up into a little flame. If I can't tease it up on the first go, I'll just touch it with the hot tip of the hot glue gun and try again. And I can always melt away the little wisps that come out. And there you go. Candle. So looking back on our map for Gloomhaven and looking at those shelves, you can't make out a lot of the details. I can't quite see what a bunch of this stuff is, but I do think that I can see some cloves of garlic, and in the description it definitely mentions fish. So I'm going to try and sculpt both of those things. And I'm going to take out a little glob of green stuff for that. We're actually going to sculpt some stuff because I don't have fish or garlic pieces that would work. So this is the container that my green stuff came in. It's just a little bit of plastic. I'm just going to put a little water down. Just take out something that the green stuff isn't really going to stick to. And I'm going to smush out a little blob like this and flatten it, not too flat, but smush it down on there. I'm going to take my sculpting tool, get that wet, and I'm just going to cut out a fish shape. If you think you can't sculpt with green stuff, it's, sometimes it's surprising what you can do. I'm not the best sculptor, but for something like this, it's not too bad. No one's really going to tell you that your fish doesn't look right. No one really cares. You might have fishermen in your family who disagree, but I don't know. Who's going to criticize you? So I'm going to cut out a little. You all know what a fish looks like. It's got a little football-shaped body and a little tail at the end. Scale doesn't matter because this could be a big fish, could be a little fish. Who cares? We're just gonna cut out the general shape. Once we're happy with our basic fishy shape, I'm going to take this file, and I'm really only using this because it's got a nice point to it. So we're going to start drawing in some details on this fish. First, we're going to take the spot where the head meets the body, and I'm just going to draw in some gills. There's one like that. There's one like that. There's one like that. Something along those lines. Let's go and draw in a little mouth right below the point of the nose. Like that. and maybe a little circle for where the eye goes. Go. Etch in some little fins. Like that. Let's flip it around. And then we'll just draw in some lines to texture the fins on the back and on the tail. Let's go ahead and use my sculpting tool for that, because we're just drawing lines. You don't have to make little points. So we'll just go line, 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 line. Draw this line right here. Make lots of little fishy fin lines. So let's take a look at how we did there. Yeah, I'll clean that up a little bit, but that'll give the impression of a nice fish. Now that we've got our fish sculpted, the next thing we're going to do is make some garlic bulbs. And we're not going to worry about making these too precise. If we want to, we can really clear up the details in the paint job. But all we're going to do is take little globs of green stuff. We make a tiny little ball, and then we're going to pinch it on one end so that it tapers. By the way, if for whatever reason you don't have a hot glue gun, this is another way you can make the flames for your candles. You just have to glue them on top of the candlesticks once they're cured. Anyway, once we have a rough tapered ball, we're just going to take our file, pencil, whatever, and we're just going to jab the end like that so that the garlic bulb kind of has an inset area at the base. There you go. So just something a bit like that. And we're going to do that a bunch of times. Make tiny little garlic bulbs that we can put together on the next thing that we'll be making. Now let's make some stuff to hold your fish or your garlic bulbs or whatever. On the picture of the map, it's got a couple of metal trays. Now, I tried making metal trays and it was too difficult, so I'm just going to use some found objects. Here's an old toy from my kids' set. It's some sort of chair. Well, we don't need this, but it does have a cool base. And if you turn it upside down, it looks exactly like a metal tray. I'm not going to worry about the hole in the middle because I'll be covered up with stuff. So all I'm going to do is clip off that base and cut down the little excess that I left on there. And there you go. There's one metal tray. Now that's more of a found object. You're going to have trouble finding something like that. What's more common is this little tab that came off a bottle of olive oil, a big plastic jug of olive oil. This is one of those pull-off things to keep it from spilling when it's still got its cap on in the store. So if you have something like that, you can just clip off the extra little pull tab thing and clean up some of the excess from the tab. Anything that's still left on, you can always cover it up by the tail of your fish or the bulbs of garlic. Or alternatively, you can just do a better job than I'm doing. That would also work. And there you go, another metal tray. I want to clear up some of this flash along the edge as well. Anyway, you get the idea. The other thing that you can do is just use a little bit of paper. Here's one that I made earlier, kind of a little alchemist table. So I just have a little bit of crunched up paper next to a bowl that clearly they're chopping some herbs on. So guess what? We're just going to use paper. I'm going to take a sheet of any old paper like this and make this a little bit bigger because it's going to have a fish on it. Cut out a rough square, you know, something like that. Crumple it up, unfold it again, glue it down on the table, and there you go. A little bit of parchment to clean your fish on. Now on this one, I just added a little glob of glue in the center after that was on, and then sprinkled on some sand. Or you could of course use basil or something like that. So the next thing we're going to make is a little bowl like this one right here. And the thing that I found works pretty well for that are the ends of old dead markers or pens. So you could cut an end off like that or off the cap like that. In this case, I'm going to use this pen cap here. When I initially did this, I used my Dremel with the cutting bit attached. This one I think is going to be a little bit thinner plastic, so I just used my X-Acto blade and that came off pretty well. It does make kind of a rough cut. It doesn't make it real even. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit with the X-Acto. Once you've got it roughly level with your X-Acto knife, I'm going to take this sanding block, a little block with a bit of sandpaper on it. You could just use a flat piece of sandpaper or even a big file or something. And I'm just going to, you know, sand that down a little bit. Give it a cleaner top to the edge of the bowl. And there you go. Then you can just add a spot of glue, fill it with sand, basil, something else from your spice cabinet, or whatever else this bowl should hold. And since we're making bowls of herbs and powders and things, we might want a little scoop or sifter, kind of like that. And the way I found you can make one of those is we go back to our pen, take that apart, go to the little tube in between there, and we're going to cut off a little section at a fairly acute angle. Let's try something like that. There we go, that looks pretty good. Then go and grab ourselves a toothpick, cut the taper off fairly, most of the taper off, leave a little bit there. Go and attach that in like that. Cut off a length for the handle. There you go. And there you have it. A little scoop or sifter. I'm going to put a spot of crazy glue on that to keep it in place. But that's it. Ta-da! With all that stuff built, I then just glued it on to the top of the table, and with that, our projects are all constructed and ready for paint. First, we undercoat everything with a black spray paint, in this case a little GW Chaos Black. I'm going to paint the rest of the colors on these pieces the same way I paint everything. I've gone over this system a lot of times in the past. It's not going to vary. I've used these exact same colors a couple times. So just real quickly, I'm going to start with brown because that's the most prevalent. It's usually the furthest down in the model and it requires a lot of dry brushing. So I want to do that first because I don't like touching up stuff later when I do dry brushing or other, really sloppy techniques. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a base dark color. In this case, it's going to be burnt umber plus black. Then a wash of a darker color, in this case black. And then 5 levels of highlights. In this case, I'm going to be dry brushing, and the first color I'm going to highlight with is burnt umber. And then brown iron oxide. and then spice brown. Then we do spice brown mixed with a little trail tan. And finally, spice brown mixed with a little bit more trail tan. So now these crates, since they are just brown, are all done. Set those aside. Move on to the next ones. And what I'm going to do next is everything, this is not strictly necessary, but just to clean stuff up a little bit after all that dry brushing. Everything that's not brown, I'm going to go over in black. Then we're going to go on to our silver parts. We're going to start with a base color of this folk art platinum mixed with a bunch of black. Next, I'm going to put down a little black wash on just those areas. And then I'm going to do 4 levels of highlights using black and increasing amounts of the platinum. Okay, and then the barrels are done. So next we're going to take our remaining terrain pieces and we're going to put in the rest of the base colors. So real quickly, for the bottles I used midnight blue. For the paper and this bowl I used a little spice brown and trail tan. For these jars I used barn red mixed with black. For the blue bottle I used mermaid blue. For the fish I used denim blue mixed with a little midnight blue. And finally for the bulbs of garlic I'm using spice brown mixed with a little bit of ivory. So now I'm going to do a series of washes on the remaining colors. Let's see, for the light blue I used a Copen blue wash. For the brownish paper and the ivory garlic I used a burnt umber wash. For the reds and the midnight blues I used a black wash. And for this fish I've gone and mixed up a little midnight blue wash. And so that's the end of the washes after I let these dry, and we'll move on to the highlights. So as you can see, I've been moving forward with the highlights. I'm skipping past some of this stuff. I figure if you've seen me paint one thing, you know how I paint everything. So 5 layers of highlights. The garlic bulbs, I start with a relatively dark mix of spice brown and ivory, and then highlight it up by adding more ivory. The blue, I started with midnight blue and added increasing amounts of mermaid blue. The tan, again, that was a mix of trail tan and spice brown. Added in a little bit more trail tan, went up to trail tan, and then started adding in a little white. The blue for the fish here, the base color was a mix of this denim blue and midnight blue. Now I'm painting on straight denim blue. Then I'm going to add in a little Cape Cod blue, go up to Cape Cod blue, and then add in a little white. And we'll check in after I've done a little bit more. So now I've completely finished painting my benches. The standard red that I have here for the fruit, I highlighted up with maroon plus black, then onto maroon, Tompe red, and then I added a little pumpkin orange into the Tompe red for the final highlight. Similar kind of thing for the jars. The red here, I went with barn red plus black up to barn red, then added in some red iron oxide up to red iron oxide, and then added in adobe red. And the blue bottle right here, the base color was mermaid blue, and I just added increasing amounts of white to that. And with that, they're all painted. It is time to seal it, to varnish it. Normally I would use a spray varnish, but if you don't mind me complaining for just a moment here, I went and I used some of this Army Painter matte varnish. And it looked okay when I tested it, but after I was done painting the first couple of models, the crates and the barrels, I found that it had left this white chalky film all over everything. The surface that I was spraying on, the models themselves, I was really disappointed. At first I thought that it was just I was spraying it when it was too warm outside. It was a really dry, warm day. I thought, well, maybe it was activating in the air and that was the problem with it. But I tried it again this morning when it was cooler out in the shade, and it did the exact same thing. I've used this stuff before. I think I got a bad bottle, but I think I'm done with Army Painter products. I've already stopped using their primer because I got a bad can once and it never cured. The stuff just stayed tacky on the model the entire time, and so I was done with that. I decided I don't like their green stuff. Their 2-part epoxy putty, there's something about the plasticky feel to it, plus it it gets these little cured spots inside the putty that makes it really tough to work with, so I don't like their epoxy putty. And now this with their spray on varnish, I hate to badmouth a company and everything, but I think I'm done with their products. I've had too many bad experiences. The good news is that even though I was really upset that I had sprayed down my nicely painted models with this white film, I found out that if I take this brush on varnish, in this case this Tester's dull coat top coat stuff, and I brushed it on the models that I had put the white film on, I don't know, it reactivates the material or something, and it actually got rid of that white film, so it looks okay. So that's what I'm doing right now. I don't want to go out and buy another can of spray varnish. I'm just gonna protect the whole models with a nice brush on coat of good old Tester's top coat dull coat. Haven't had a problem with that so far. I will go back to spray on varnish at some point. It's just not it's just not a good use of time to brush on varnish for large terrain projects, but I'm gonna go with a different product than the Army Painter stuff. So that's it. We'll check back in when everything is all set up on the game board. And finally, here's everything all set up and ready for use in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion Scenario 8. Just take a little look around so you can see it all. I think it turned out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe I could have spent a little bit more time sculpting the fish. They didn't turn out as well as I would have liked. I think I was a little bit overconfident on that one. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy. Although I will tell you, I think I'd be okay if it were a while before I had to make any more of these benches. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and leave them below, and I will see you on the next one.